China is the largest police state in the world. It uses surveillance to go after dissidents and minorities. And who helped them build that surveillance? Microsoft and other American tech companies. This is how they did it. Welcome back to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. The Chinese Communist Party has built the world's most advanced systems of mass surveillance. And this is the laboratory where the Chinese regime tests this new technology, the region of Xinjiang, home to a mostly Muslim ethnic Uyghur population. The surveillance includes a network of 40,000 facial recognition cameras, as well as collecting DNA samples, fingerprints, iris scans, and blood samples from most Xinjiang residents. It's a dystopian nightmare everyone warned us about. But we here in America didn't simply sit idly by while the Chinese regime was building this Orwellian system. In fact, our companies actively helped. U.S. tech companies knowingly worked with the Chinese military, as well as with private Chinese companies contracted to do work for the Chinese government. The problem is what's called dual-use technology. Technology like facial recognition that has both civilian and military applications. There's very little regulation of this. According to Foreign Policy, U.S. Congress and government officials have yet to call for a review of the extent of U.S. investment and research partnership entanglements. The Commerce Department has proposed some rules for emerging tech, but the scope is unclear. Fortunately, at the end of last year, Microsoft truly stepped up to the plate. They said there's a need for public regulation and corporate responsibility. Wow, good for Microsoft. Except Microsoft ignored both public regulation and corporate responsibility by working with the Chinese military. According to a report last week in the Financial Times, Microsoft has worked with a Chinese military-run university on artificial intelligence research that could be used for surveillance and censorship. Well, that's awkward. Over the course of a few months last year, 3 published papers were co-written by the Microsoft team in Beijing and researchers tied to China's National University of Defense Technology. That university is controlled by China's top military body, the Central Military Commission, which is headed by Chinese President Xi Jinping. But how could Microsoft know all that? I mean, the university only has defense technology in its name and also the military symbol in its logo. That's like going to Burger King and being surprised when they have burgers and kings. One paper that Microsoft worked on describes a new AI method to recreate detailed environmental maps by analyzing human faces, which experts say could have clear applications for surveillance and censorship. Well, what a coincidence, because that's the very same kind of technology they're using in Xinjiang to track the Uyghurs. But it's dual-use technology. It could have civilian applications or military applications. How was Microsoft to know that the military university would want to use it for military applications? Now U.S. lawmakers are calling out Microsoft for what they've done. Senator Ted Cruz, hey, nice beard, says American companies need to understand that doing business in China carries significant and deepening risks. In addition to being targeted by the Chinese Communist Party for espionage, American companies are increasingly at risk of boosting the Chinese Communist Party's human rights atrocities. That's crazy. An American company knowingly helping a murderous regime persecute people? What are they, IBM? Senator Marco Rubio said Microsoft is complicit in the Chinese regime's human rights abuses. It is deeply disturbing that an American company would be actively working with the Chinese military to further build up the government's surveillance network against its own people, an act that makes them complicit in aiding the communist Chinese government's totalitarian censorship apparatus and egregious human rights abuses. In fact, he and Congressman Chris Smith spearheaded this bipartisan letter urging sanctions on China for the treatment of Uyghurs in Xinjiang. It was signed by 9 Republicans, 7 Democrats, and 1 independent. To which I say, good for the Chinese Communist Party for finally bringing Democrats and Republicans together. Now, Microsoft has defended their work with the Chinese military university. Their official response to the Financial Times was, "The research is guided by our principles, fully complies with U.S. and local laws, and is published to ensure transparency so that everyone can benefit from our work." I mean, if their principles are to make lots of money while technically not breaking any laws, then yeah, I guess they are guided by their principles. My favorite Chinese state-run media, the Global Times, also defended Microsoft. It wrote that the Chinese director of the research slammed the accusations as subjective interpretation, saying that he who has a mind to beat his dog will easily find his stick. Oh yeah? Well, just because you pointed out the stick doesn't mean you were beating a dog. Or something. It sounded more folksy in my head. The point is, this isn't Microsoft's only shady connection to mass surveillance in Xinjiang. In February, a European research team discovered that a Chinese company called SenseNets had a totally open, unsecured database of 2.5 million Uyghurs in Xinjiang. The records tracked everything from each person's ID number, birthday, address, ethnicity, employer, as well as updated GPS coordinates that could tell if, for instance, this particular person was visiting a mosque. I know that sounds creepy, but have you considered this? Maybe the police are just tracking everyone's ID, birthday, and location so they know where to deliver their state-sponsored birthday cake. Surprise! And that image is my birthday present to all of you. But back to creepy surveillance. The company handling all this tracking, SenseNets, listed Microsoft as a partner on their website. Now, Microsoft has since said that SenseNets was lying about that partnership and offered, well, very little proof to back that up. But SenseNets has removed Microsoft's logo now, so that's good enough. But Microsoft's relationship with Chinese mass surveillance goes even deeper. The 3 papers the Financial Times discovered underscore Microsoft's long-running links to Chinese military-funded academia, including its operation of several tech clubs for students at Chinese universities known to have military links. In fact, Bill Gates got Microsoft into China by building a personal relationship with former Chinese leader and murder toad Jiang Zemin. And Jiang Zemin's son owned a 50% share of the MSN China website. But before you say, wow, Microsoft is the worst, I should tell you that there are actually lots of American companies and organizations doing shady things in China, like Cisco. Cisco helped build China's Great Firewall. That's the Communist Party's internet censorship system that prevents Chinese netizens from accessing dangerous websites like YouTube. And a leaked internal PowerPoint presentation showed that Cisco was very aware that one of the Chinese regime's goals for the Great Firewall was to target Falun Gong and other Chinese dissidents, helpfully called hostiles. Falun Gong is the main group the Chinese regime was persecuting at the time. Falun Gong practitioners' main thing is hour-long meditation and exercises, which I have to say is an incredibly boring thing to put under surveillance, but hey, I'm not the one paying for it. So Cisco took a look at how the Chinese Communist Party was monitoring and arresting all these people and thought, what a great opportunity to sell more routers. It's not just Cisco. Top American university MIT has a wide-reaching partnership with SenseTime. SenseTime is a world leader in AI facial recognition technology. It also owns a 49% stake in SenseNets, that company keeping an eye on 2.5 million Uyghurs. The one Microsoft claims is totally not a partner. And SenseNets is mainly owned by its Chinese parent company, NetPosa. In 2010, NetPosa got some big investment from an American venture capital firm, Intel Capital. It's where great companies are built. Which is good because NetPosa has been doing its own investing in U.S. robotics startups, like Bitto Robotics. It's led by researchers at Carnegie Mellon University. NetPosa also invested in Exyn, a drone software company which is competing in an AI challenge run by DARPA. DARPA is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. That's the part of the U.S. Defense Department responsible for the development of emerging technologies for use by the military. If you're like me, you know about DARPA thanks to Metal Gear Solid.
You're the DARPA chief, Donald Anderson, right?
No, Snake! That's Decoy Octopus, disguised as DARPA Chief Donald Anderson. And the fox dye virus the Pentagon injected you with is going to give him a heart attack.
But what about the Pentagon?
Pentagon? What is it?
Told ya. Most of what I know about DARPA comes from a video game. Anyway, as I mentioned earlier, the Xinjiang government is also monitoring Uyghurs using their DNA. And guess who's helping? More American companies. Up until this February, the American company Thermo Fisher was selling DNA sequencers directly to Xinjiang authorities. This Yale professor shared DNA samples with China's Ministry of Public Security. I mean, come on. How can you be a Yale professor and not understand what the Ministry of Public Security gets up to in an authoritarian state like China? California-based Amex works on computer deep learning. They have a partnership with China's state-owned Hikvision and... Okay, you know what? I'm just going to stop here. Otherwise, this episode will be like 10 hours long. And I don't think our video editor, Seamus, would like that. But these American tech companies should know better. It's well known that Chinese companies built the internment camps in Xinjiang. Chinese companies built the technology that monitors their every move. Chinese companies built the software that monitors Uyghurs online. So maybe, if you give these Chinese companies or Chinese military researchers your latest cutting-edge technology, it might get used for some not-so-great things. But hey, it's not like we learned any lessons from history. So what do you think of how U.S. companies have helped build China's surveillance state? Let me know in the comments below. And now, it's time for me to answer a question from one of you, a fan who supports China Uncensored with $1 or more per episode by contributing to the crowdfunding website Patreon. Spartner251 asks, what's going to happen in the end? China will just send some little doctor or someone to put all the blame on. For clarity, that was in reference to a recent episode I did about the Chinese Communist Party being put on trial for killing innocent prisoners of conscience for their organs. So I actually think it's very likely they're going to try to blame it on someone, or on some small group, instead of the Communist Party as a whole. This is Huang Jiefu. He's the face of China's organ transplantation system. Even though he hasn't admitted to killing innocent people for their organs, he has gone on the air to make sure that any shady things that may or may not have happened were some other guy's fault. That guy is Zhou Yongkang, a high-ranking communist official who has now been purged. Now, specifically, he was talking about organs from executed prisoners. But Zhou Yongkang was a powerful figure in a political faction tied to former Chinese leader Jiang Zemin. He and his faction have been trying to oust current Chinese leader Xi Jinping, which is why Xi has been trying to purge them all, like a communist version of Pokemon. Now, Jiang Zemin, Zhou Yongkang, and others in that faction are the ones who started this system of forced organ trafficking. So I have a feeling as more evidence of these crimes against humanity comes out, Xi is going to try real hard to blame it on Jiang and his folks, so he himself doesn't get the blame. Because in communist China, the captain is the only one who doesn't have to go down with the ship. Thanks for your question, Spartner. And thank you to all my 50 Cent Army soldiers who support China Uncensored. It's only because of your support that we've been able to cover topics that most other TV shows don't want to, because they prefer to get advertising dollars rather than criticize the Chinese Communist Party. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.